There's an old story from a small fishing village on the coast of Japan. An elderly fisherman named Hiroshi had woken up before dawn every single morning for more than 60 years. And one day, a young writer visiting the village asked him how he'd stayed so driven for so many decades when most people lose their motivation within a few years of starting anything. Hiroshi laughed quietly and said, "You're asking the wrong question, my friend. I never wake up motivated. I haven't felt motivated in maybe 50 years. What I have is something far more reliable than motivation, and it's something the modern world has almost completely forgotten how to teach." That one line can change the way you understand motivation entirely. Because most of us were raised to believe motivation is the engine that drives our lives forward, that the people who succeed simply have more of it than the rest of us. So you chase motivational videos, quotes, and books, hoping to find some hidden source of energy that will finally make you consistent. But here's the truth the old Japanese culture understood, the truth we've somehow lost. Motivation is one of the least reliable forces in human life. It comes and goes like weather. The people who actually build meaningful lives aren't the ones who feel motivated more often. They're the ones who've built systems that no longer need motivation to keep moving forward. And that's what this is really about, the quieter methods that produce something far more sustainable than motivation. Methods almost nobody talks about because they're not dramatic enough to sell. And yet, they've kept entire generations of Japanese craftsmen, artists, and ordinary people moving steadily forward through decade after decade of their lives. To start, you have to face something uncomfortable. You've been told motivation is a feeling, and that you should wait until that feeling shows up before you begin. But motivation, like every emotion, is unpredictable and mostly outside your control. If your ability to act depends on how you feel in the moment, then your life gets ruled by your moods, and very little of substance ever gets built. The older Japanese understanding flips this completely. There, motivation isn't the cause, it's the byproduct. Something that shows up naturally once you begin, not something that has to be there before you're allowed to begin. The first method comes from the world of Japanese craftsmen. It's called kata, which roughly means form. It's the precise sequence of actions a craftsman performs at the start of every day, no matter how he feels. A swordsmith lights the fire the same way every morning. A calligrapher grinds his ink with the same careful motions. A potter wedges his clay through the same steps before he ever touches the wheel. The kata isn't the work itself. It's a bridge between ordinary life and focused work. A small ritual that signals to your body that something important is about to begin. And here's what's fascinating. The kata removes the question of whether you feel motivated, because you're not being asked to do the work yet. You're only being asked to perform the kata. It's small enough, familiar enough, that resistance never gets the chance to form. By the time the kata is finished, your body has already slipped into the work on its own. Your kata can be simple. Make a small pot of tea. Light a stick of incense at the corner of your desk. 4 minutes every morning. And soon, you stop waking up wondering whether you'll work today. The kata answers that question before your mind even asks it. The second method is called yarinuku, which means to push a thing through to its complete end, even when the meaning of doing it has temporarily disappeared. In Japanese culture, there's a deep respect for the quiet stubbornness of finishing what you started, no matter how you feel in the middle. The people who build remarkable lives have made a private agreement with themselves to continue, even on the days when the path no longer seems to make sense. Yarinuku isn't easy. It doesn't promise you'll feel inspired. It simply asks you to honor the agreement you made with yourself on the days when it costs you almost nothing, and on the days when it costs you almost everything. And here's the paradox. This quiet continuation produces an inner stability that motivated people rarely feel. You become someone who can be relied on, including by yourself. And that reliability becomes its own engine, one that no longer depends on your emotional weather. The third method is about how the Japanese think about the smallness of daily progress. In the West, you're taught to set ambitious goals and feel urgency about hitting them fast. The philosophy of Kaizen takes the opposite approach. Any goal, no matter how distant, can be reached through almost invisibly small daily improvements. and the smallness itself is what makes it sustainable. A writer who adds 2 sentences each morning finishes a book within a few years. When the daily commitment is small enough that resistance can't form against it, you keep showing up. And the showing up eventually produces results the motivated people, the ones who burn out and quit, will never reach. There's a wonderful phrase for this: ichi nichi ichi zen. One good thing each day. The fourth method comes from Zen monastic life. It's called samu, the practice of treating ordinary, repetitive work as a form of meditation. In monasteries, monks spend much of the day cleaning the temple, tending gardens, and preparing meals. Samu teaches that the quality of attention you bring to a task matters far more than the prestige of the task. Most people lose motivation because they've decided their daily tasks are boring, beneath their potential, and that quiet judgment drains the energy out of everything. But when you treat the small, unglamorous tasks with the same care a monk brings to sweeping the floor, the work itself begins to feel meaningful. Imagine washing your coffee cup with the same attention you bring to your most important work. The fifth method is shinen, the deliberate planting of a single clear intention each morning. This isn't a to-do list, it's choosing one simple sentence that captures what you want this day to mean. Today I will be patient. Today I will finish what I begin. What matters is that you've given the day a center, a point you can return to whenever it starts to feel scattered. Because one of the deepest reasons people lose motivation is that their days have no center. Shinen takes 30 seconds and it carries you forward. The sixth method is about rest. You tend to think of rest as the reward that comes after enough work, so most people only rest when they're completely exhausted. But the older Japanese tradition understood this destroys motivation over time. There's a principle called yoyu, the deliberate keeping of a margin of unused capacity in your life. Motivation isn't produced by pushing harder. It's produced by protecting the inner resources that make showing up tomorrow possible. The people who embody this never seem rushed or depleted. They stop before they're exhausted and rest before they're desperate. That careful protection of the margin is exactly what lets them stay present for decades, while their ambitious peers burn out within years. Look back across all of these, and what stands out is how different this is from everything you've been taught. You've been told motivation is something you feel, something you generate inside yourself before you're allowed to begin. The Japanese tradition tells you instead that motivation is the natural byproduct of small daily structures, and anyone who builds those structures moves forward steadily, no matter how they feel on any given morning. The kata that begins your day, the quiet promise of yarinuku, the small progress of Kaizen, the dignified attention of samu, the gentle anchor of shinen, the protected margin of yoyu. Together, they create a way of living where motivation is no longer required, because the structures themselves carry you forward. That's the secret the old fisherman understood. He didn't wake up motivated. He woke up into a way of life that no longer needed motivation to function. And that might be the most freeing realization you'll ever arrive at. The pressure to feel motivated disappears the moment you realize you don't need to feel motivated. You only need to honor the small structures you've built, and the structures will quietly do the rest. So take care of your daily rhythms. They're quietly shaping the entire course of your life. And I'll see you in the next one.